Hello, a good very late evening to everyone. I wanted to briefly speak in English because I've been doing a lot of lives lately, most of them in Armenian. And I thought to take an opportunity to explain certain things, to give a certain outline in English for those who hear me. Because today our Prime Minister had given a speech at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. And it was a priori received by the President of the Assembly as a sign of a blossoming democracy. And he did give a speech describing a country he has turned into a chaos for a year now in front of your European eyes, as a very democratic, very transparent country who has won in all areas of life, in social justice, in fight with the corruption, and all kinds of blah. And he missed a lot of things in his speech. And I'm sure the intelligence communities of your own countries have been reporting you about his wrongdoings in the country. But right now, your international or global political agenda doesn't allow you to speak about it. Right now, he's pretty useful to your cause in our region. And so you receive him with applauses. You take his words when he says that what happened in Armenia is not a colored revolution, as if that was true. When your own country's ambassadors, your own observers, various NGOs funded by your funds, at times directly from your foreign ministries, have been for years working to have Armenia behave and act in the same line as Ukraine and Georgia, because your organization, your assembly, has been holding an anti-Russia stance, an anti-Iran stance, at times not by its own choice. I understand there is a strong Euro-Atlantic lobby. I understand there is a certain agenda after the end of the Cold War, which by all signs is not finished at all. You still go on trying to get new territories to control. You have your unsettled issues with Russia. You have your unsettled issues with China, your unsettled issues with Iran. You have your ongoing use of Middle Eastern countries. And you know, you applaud a man who says that he has discovered a new Armenia. He's starting a new Armenia. It's a project, by every mean a colored revolution project. Because by saying so, by stating so, he distances us, diaspora Armenians, and Armenians who had to leave the Armenia of the 90s, which turned into mayhem. He turns us into a piece of history, into ashes, to play a game of favoritism to please you. Today, I want to congratulate all of my people and all of Europe, because after 101 years, finally, France, for example, has announced April 24th as an official day of commemoration of the Armenian Genocide. 101 years. That speaks a lot about what democracy or human rights are for you. And the lower house of the Italian parliament has also passed a resolution on the Armenian Genocide. And of course, their ambassador in Turkey was called upon the foreign ministry in Turkey to give an explanation, as they say, because you played Turkey's game for 100 years, you played the NATO game with Turkey for 100 years, you ignored the genocide of Armenians, of Greeks, of Pontians, of Assyrians, you allowed a criminal state to go on to do its crimes, to appropriate my history, our history, which is older than many histories of your own countries. A country that used to work and live with ancient Greece and with Iran. And we have become a dot on a map today, and we're hanging on a little piece of land to sustain our identity, which was genocided in front of your eyes 100 years ago, and you hadn't done anything, and you're not doing anything today. You just recognize it, because the perpetrator itself is not going to do that, and you know that. You are an observer to our history. You never participated, you never saved us, you never did anything. Century after century after century, if it weren't for Iran or for Russia, we would be lost completely. We would be erased from the map completely. Our history gone, our language gone. And yet we are here, and yet you've been financing, you've been fueling a Trojan horse inside our country, a project of a colored revolution whose representative today, who has only won 70% within the 48% of the voting population who showed up to the elections. You have given him a stage to come and say that my country is new and he's a new guy, and everything else that has been done before him is null and void. And a lot of things that he made null and void included your own activities in our countries when you had approved of the elections of the previous governments. You yourselves had approved them to be transparent and democratic. You yourselves. And today he came and he said everything was wrong. I'm the right guy. Because he, in your eyes, is going to play the anti-Russia agenda. It's not about democracy. It's that the previous ones would hold a status quo. It's not even an entirely pro-Russian line. A status quo, because that's what's important for my nation. We don't want any part in your big, stupid games, which have nothing in common with peace and quiet and economic prosperity anywhere in the world. Your track record is really, really negative. And you have allowed this guy to come out and speak of all of his chaotic initiatives in my country that was pretty fine in status quo. We will not pick sides until you have picked your sides, until you have played yet another war. We don't want to be victims of yet another war in the region, and it's approaching us. You proved in Syria and Iraq that you had no capacity to protect the Armenian communities that are historical communities. Most certainly, you're the last ones who will be interested in providing safety for the Armenians in Artsakh. It's not Karabakh, it's Artsakh. Learn to say the name exactly as is, because in Western Anatolia, which is Eastern Turkey, because of your silence for 100 years, locations that historically had Armenian names, far much longer than Turkey is itself. They've been changing the name of the locations. They've been ruining our churches, our historiography. So names are very important to a nation like mine. And there is only 10 million of us left, 3 in Armenia and 7 in other countries. And you see how well we integrate, and we live in all countries, Muslim, Christian, China, Japan, no matter. Because we're not interested in wars. We've been surviving because we're not interested in wars. You may smile politely, give beautiful diplomatic speeches about human rights and everything. To us, your speeches are null and void, and any project that is a Trojan horse, financed by you, brainwashed by you, and placed in my country to create an effect of implosion, so I can abide to your rules once again. When you allow no guarantees, you give no guarantees of safety for my nation anywhere, including Iranian Armenians. He did not speak of Iranian Armenians today, did he? He did not speak of the genocide, did he? He did not salute France's initiative or Italy's initiative. He did not press that simply writing on a piece of paper that what happened was a genocide is not enough. Because we have lands there. On one of those lands, land plots, right now there is an American base in Incirlik. And that location, that land, by paper, officially belonged to an Armenian family that got massacred. Maybe you choose to forget because it's not yours. It's not your nation. You don't care, even though you did take a lot of benefits from our cultural heritage. But that's not enough for you. We need to be part of some projects you do the whole time, wars and money and weapons and trafficking and every unjust and Christian thing you can imagine. We never want to be a part of that. So can you for once play your beautiful war games with beautiful diplomatic language, sugar-coated with human rights and things like that? Can you play that without us? We don't want to be involved. We're not interested in NATO. We're really not. You think Caucasus will be part of NATO? For real? North Atlantic? Which part of us is North or Atlantic? What do you want from us? How can you upload a bunch of lies when you have the true intelligence? He did not speak of the journalist who had announced a hunger strike in a jail where he was held illegally. And he died there. He did not speak of that. He did not speak of having given amnesty to terrorists and criminals. He did not speak about the growing rate of crimes. He did not speak how he's going to fire employees of two entire ministries, Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Diaspora. Because he wants to create a mega ministry, he calls it optimization. He did not speak of his revolutionary groups attacking our church because it suits your agenda. By the help of sects, Christian sects, whose ideology comes from outside of our country, and the financing also comes from outside of our country. So we have no chance to stand for our faith, for our values. Isn't that true democracy? When people realize their identity, their values, and they want to be no part of your war. And they never announced the war to anyone. But the enemy came with war every time, killing us. And Artsakh stood because it was the one time we took weapon, we said, no, you're not going to kill us again. And you're playing a diplomatic game for Artsakh? You have some kind of a dove of peace who came from Armenia who's going to save the entire Caucasus. This is ridiculous. The murder of Armenians, the massacres of Armenians ongoing, not the first century. How many more centuries, how many more millions should we die? So you finally have found your democracy and your human rights. How long is it going to work? How exactly is it going to work? When your real agenda is not the establishment of human rights, your real aim is a weakening Russia and a weakening Iran. And one single global financial framework that will dictate everyone, every nation on this planet, how to live, what to eat, what to think, how to dress. What happened to pluralism on a global stage? That's true democracy. When, with all our differences, we remain equal and we have mutual respect for one another. He did not speak that he has placed the second president in a jail and doesn't even allow him to meet with his granddaughter, whose age is 2.5 years old, because apparently that's a threat to some national security. No, that's a threat to you, because that one second president will not allow any games on our territories. He will not allow anyone to play us against Russia or Iran. And by the way, both in Russia and Iran, we have huge Armenian diaspora communities. So we have vital interests in playing our game, our way, and not your way. We have entire communities of whom your cheerleader did not speak of. He did not speak about Iranian Armenians or Russia's Armenian community. Do you want us to be separated or what? Or I could tell you this. Recognize the Western Armenia by all existing international treaties about Western Armenia. They do exist, right? Recognize that land as Armenia, because some countries apparently have that kind of practice. When they have the dictate of money and of their armies anywhere in the world, they can come, sit on a land and say, I decided that this land belongs to that one. So you can go and claim Western Armenia because you're so strong and you're so democratic and you're so powerful and you like to play wars, right? Go and recognize it, Armenia. So all Armenians from America, from Iran, from Russia, from France, from Germany, right? An aftermath of genocide. So we all move back into our homeland. So there will be no more Armenians in Russia, no more in Iran. We will not have any vital concerns anymore. And you can go and deal as you wish. But as long as we have Armenians living in these countries, you cannot expect that the Armenian communities the world over are going to shut their mouths when you are designing wars and you are playing this civilizational contest that apparently the West has the priority and every right to dictate everyone else how to live. How? I don't understand you. Are you the UN? How exactly do you go on playing one war after another if even the UN doesn't approve of them? This is a world of political correctness. This is a world where those in power and with money decide how everyone else is going to live. This is not a world of a UN where parties are equal and they equally decide that they're not going to participate in a war. We understand the real situation. Why do you think that we should believe in your pink dreams, in some Pinocchio Wonderland or something, when every time in our history you simply abandoned us and we ended up getting killed and massacred? And you are cheering his speech, knowing that he terrorizes businesses, that actually he has turned many powerful oligarchs against whom he was writing multitudes of articles in his Western financed press. He has turned them into his companions. These people now are not criminal oligarchs, as he was charging. They are now honest businessmen who finance his political party's campaigns, who finance the launching of his political party's new offices in fancy places, who finance some of his leadership's clothing and shopping trips. You know, there's no way your intelligence doesn't know these things. You know, it's a very small country, Armenia. It's very safe, and you just walk around the streets and you understand who's who. Why do you play this game? Why do you cheer and say, oh, you know, new history for Armenia, or The Economist announcing Armenia is the country of 2018. God forbid, you know, God save us from The Economist or being praised. These days, this is a world where you don't want anyone remembering your existence. That's your best way of survival, and not getting dragged into some kind of stupid war where millions die innocently, where chemical weapons get experimented on them, where backdated vaccinations get experimented on them. This is not a world of equality. It's not us who don't want to be democratic and unequal. It's you who don't want us to have an economic growth independent of your corrupt system, your global corrupt system, in order to provide our self-sufficiency by our own means. And you do so continuously, century after century. It doesn't matter what ism you adopt to. No, because even those countries, including Armenia, who actually won the Nazi monster in World War II, today you have come to tell us that the Soviet people who won the Nazi monster apparently were monsters themselves. Both my grandfathers fought in that war. They were survivors of genocide. They were fathers of children in Armenia. But as a gratitude and happiness, out of happiness of being Soviet citizens that were rescued, that finally were given a country, and gratitude towards Russians, they volunteered to come and fight the Nazi monster. They didn't come because they were communists or somebody told them if you don't go something will happen to you. They volunteered. Armenia, that was saved barely after the genocide, had produced enough people for us to have so many victims and to have 5 marshals. By the way, they come from Karabakh, from Artsakh. And they came and they won over. And that was the only way that you, dear European fellows, sat down and decided that you're going to establish peace and prosperity for all. But then you switched into Cold War mode. You switched. You can tell us it's different, your history is better because you're more democratic, you're more plushy, you're softer, you boo, 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 boo. But me, after so many genocides and your silence and incapacity to ever actually come and save, like ever, I don't believe in your softness and plushiness. I prefer the non-smiling Russian who actually doesn't talk much, but comes and saves you and rescues your nation. And you develop, even within the Soviet years, you develop, you refined your identity, you refined your language, your place in history. I grew up in Soviet Union. I am Soviet educated, and I am proud of that. And I'm proud to be the granddaughter of people who gave their lives to kill the Nazi monster. One of them didn't come back. One of my grandfathers didn't come back. Every Armenian household gave a hero, gave a soldier to that war. So you don't come to us with war again. And now you're up for another project. You have designed the Greater Middle East, where you are the ones who have to establish some kind of peace. You don't use the UN as a guide. You use your own narrow interests, the interests of transnational corporations, to decide who's going to rule what in the Middle East. And Armenia or Caucasus happen to be in this project of Greater Middle East. So you have us controlling from the south, and you have us controlling from some EU agreements on enlargement and things like that. It's all very fancy, but on the ground, it does nothing. It changes nothing. You try to please everyone because your priority is the economic gain for your own selves first, then everyone else. Your priority has never been, at least towards my nation, it has never been human rights. Your CV, your collective CV, as far as Armenia is concerned, is one big failure. We have no oil, we have nothing. You have no interest in saving a nation because it has some great history or has created some cultural heritage that is really incredibly unique, really original, that its language is a history of its own, a history dating back all the way to the creation of humanity. You don't care about these things. You care about oil and money and interests and putting your green mark on every money that anyone can come out with and try to produce. This is the global image. I understand the whole politically correct story. I understand your textbooks. I've studied them. I've known them. But when I take your beautiful theories and I place them and I compare them to the history of my people, of my very own family's history, you are one big failure not to be trusted. Because good or bad, I'm not saying that Russia was always perfect, but good or bad, they saved us more. So I'm choosing the least harmful ones amongst you to work with and to live with. So I'm in a region where in the 90s, where you abandoned us once again, and we were very close to getting annihilated once again. And once again, there was a prime minister in Turkey, Tansu Çiller, who very bravely stated that the remainder of the land in Armenia is pretty good enough to turn that into cemetery for the remaining living Armenians. They were going to attack us, and Russia didn't allow them to do that. Through its diplomacy, through other means, itself being engaged in several wars you had created for them. Apparently, when you speak of democracy, like it just smells of bullets and bombs and chemical experiments and very nasty things. So it doesn't really match. You cannot stage colored revolution in my country and then look me in the eyes and say it was not colored revolution. It's done for your human rights. If it's done for human rights, then stand by my cause of genocide, because it starts there. Get my lands back to me. Tell all of those who killed us because we were Armenians and Christians and living on our land to stop killing us. That would be human rights. Then help us preserve our cultural heritage without having any nations appropriating it, misappropriating it as theirs by the power of oil and caviar diplomacy. You are dishonest. You're not equal in your approach. And I'm not going to speak the legal gibberish, the politically correct language to you. I know that language very well, believe me. I can speak in it in at least 5 languages. But I'm going to speak from the point of a common sense of a nation that has been around for at least 4,000 years. Because that's my history, and it's not up to you to erase it in order to suit your agenda. You have failed us from the point of civilizational value, cultural heritage, and the point of Christianity. We preserve those values. Those are dear to us, and we preserve them. You choose not to because it suits your agenda today. You want to serve some money masters. Money masters who are money monsters. I don't understand what ideology you believe in. I do understand what democracy is in its Athenian sense. In true ancient Greek philosophical sense, none of that exists today, ever, anywhere, especially when it comes to Middle East, especially when it comes to you reshuffling certain affairs between certain countries so you can finally go on and attack Iran. So Iran today is encircled by American military bases. Almost everywhere in these bases, there go ongoing joint NATO operations. There is one tiny Armenia on the north, one tiny corridor, but very important, and Artsakh attached to it, that has the Russian military base right on the border with Turkey and has no American base on its grounds, no American boots on its grounds, only some within the auspices of cooperation, partnership for peace. Only peacekeeping forces. And this is the reshuffling you want to do. This is the kind of reshuffling you wanted to do in Crimea to get an advantage in your campaign in Syria. And it didn't work. Now you have come here. And it is important to speak about Iran. It's very important. Because even the highest brass of your military and intelligence communities were very surprised when you, as an American administration, came up and said that the Iran's Revolutionary Guard is now to be considered and treated with as a terrorist organization. That is a step forward towards war. There is many analysis, there is plenitude of articles, very interesting analysis. So anyone interested in this, you can read about the difference of opinions about the military intelligence community in the US and the political leadership. In terms of leadership of Pompeo and Bolton, these are the two men who've been commanding from the backstage, who've been commanding the reshufflings in Armenia. They want a very quick solution to Artsakh. They don't care what will happen to people there. They don't care that we will get killed once again by our sworn enemy, who've been threatening us with war every second day for the past several weeks. And where certain people of the American administration have their businesses for several decades. So you cannot really promote human rights story and democracy and other blah when your primordial interest is your money and the oil and energy security and controlling the energy distribution systems globally. It doesn't really match. They don't really match. You cannot match these things. You cannot cherry pick. Human rights is human rights. Human rights, going for human rights and getting justice. Getting justice. Not going through, oh, this is too much left, this is too much right, this is too much pro-Russian, this is too much against Russia, this is pro-Iranian, this is anti-American, this is no. When you put justice as an objective, you don't have to go searching other labels. You have a clear-cut image that justice demands that this goes there and that one goes there and you live together in peace. You cannot have Armenia left out of all infrastructure projects in the region and still come and push us after winning the war twice. The war for Artsakh, twice we won. Twice the enemy came as an aggressor against us. Not us, we did not go against them. They came with their armies, they attacked us. And we won without your help. You did not care whether we will survive or not. You never cared. You did not involve us in any infrastructure project. But you want us to do the first gesture to a threatening enemy. A gesture of kindness and peace, as in the lands that I stand by, that are my historical land, the lands that for once, for the past 7 centuries, I did not allow anyone to step in and kill me, to give it to home. So you can have a better control of the territory prior to any potential attack on Iran. Or if not attack, at least a full control over it. Because as long as Russia, Armenia and Artsakh cooperate together, you don't get that chunk of border. You don't get to control anything. There is a corridor, a lifeline for Iran that will operate without you being able to control it in any way. Or even if you will try to participate, then you will not have the upper hand. And this is why you don't care what will happen to us. And there is no way that even if we would bend backwards for your demands and say, okay, let the NATO in, let all of your boots in. We know, we saw what you did to Armenians in Iraq and Syria. You don't care. You don't care who your next terrorist group will kill. You know that ISIS units have been moving into Caucasus, around the borders in Northern Caucasus and in Georgia and in Azerbaijan. You have multitude of reports on this. But you're telling me to lay my weapons down, not to cooperate with Russia, not to cooperate with Iran, and simply believe in your beautiful pink plushy dream of some distant ideology of a democracy and a human rights, as if I'm some kind of backward country who cannot really produce democracy by the will of its people inside its own country. You did not make a colored revolution for human rights or whatever. You did it because those guys were either status quo or pro-Russian, and this guy, your guy, really wants to have my country subjected to your will. And he doesn't really consider diaspora's opinion in it. And this is one of your goals, because the moment a 7 million strong diaspora gets involved, then he really doesn't have much room to maneuver. So you financed those media operations in Armenia. You know which ones I'm talking about, financed by certain foreign ministries and economic aid, blah, 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 because we're too backwards. We don't know what media is. We cannot open our own media organizations. Any media organization that doesn't preach your religion is a bad media organization. So for years, you've been funneling money and controlling the quality and the content of the information given to my people. And you separated us. And this very guy, your very new servant, has been working as a journalist in similar press to bias the stories which don't really match with our national interest. Any one of you, powerful ones, you have your national interests, right? You think that human rights and democracy are values created by you, which you're going to preach others. You have your banking sector, you have your military sector, you have your corporations. So whatever governments come in your countries to power, they have to make sure that their agendas stay intact. So any country like mine can be used to that aim. However, you're leading a certain real politics where you're the only ones entitled to a national interest. A country like mine apparently doesn't have that kind of entitlement. My opinion, and the opinion of the majority of diasporans, is we have every right to that entitlement. We are very much awake. We are very much aware on how wars are played, and our nation has been witness to such wars from very ancient times when none of you were around. We've seen wars between Persia and Greece and Persia and Rome. We saw the fall of Assyria. We saw the fall of many, many ancient powers. We know how wars are designed. We don't care what kind of ism is attached to it. We know why wars are designed and fought. What we don't know is why on earth would you like to use the lives of my people, of my homeland, to your end? Today, the world plays a dangerous game that leads to a war. Again, I could really explain this for at least 4 or 5 hours using very legit politically correct language, quoting legal texts and corresponding to the style of conversations you have in those lobbying groups and in those big assemblies. But I'm going to speak from common sense point of view because we don't have the luxury of time to have nice chit chat. The war being too close to our borders, and every such war having historically taken lives of at least 1 million of us. So if you want to fight a war, be a man, fight those wars on your own territories, sacrifice your own people to that war, your own people. And then come to me and preach me about a non-colored revolution that is all about democracy. Double standards world, at least there should be a voice that says what really is happening, because this has turned into an Alice in Wonderland adventure for my people for several centuries now, and we're getting tired of it. So cheer as much as you can, but he lied today about economy, he lied today about political repressions, he lied today about the atmosphere of safety and happiness, because no one today in Armenia feels safe. My friends are afraid to write statuses. They're writing me in secret from another phone, a number that no one knows. And this is happening when your side keeps threatening Russia and Iran on a daily basis and plays dangerous games with China. So this is my position. I use my freedom of speech as a member of contemporary democratic international society to let you know that your games are stupid as far as my nation is concerned, and you're very conniving to be using nations like ours to achieve your goals. There is nothing honest about you. There is nothing decent about what you do anywhere in the Middle East, be that the Greater Middle East or the Gulf or the Middle East historical itself. There. Cheers to you. I hope God enlightens you with more wisdom and actual love and actual respect